Thank you, Mackeral Quota2. Minister, this question just is in relation to the annual mackerel quota allocation, where the doom and gloom is announced beforehand and percentage cuts that are huge, and then all of a sudden the department rides in on the white horse and saves the day and gets a lesser reduction, but at the same time every year it's reduced. So I just wonder what the department's view is in relation to the annual negotiations.
Thank you, Deputy. The negotiations the Deputy refers to are those concerning the management of mackerel in the North East Atlantic, which is Ireland's single most important fishery. Negotiations concluded in Bergen last week after 5 separate rounds, and the parties to the final agreement were the European Union, Norway and the Faroe Islands. Ireland is the second largest EU quota holder, and my officials participated in every stage of the talks. The countries involved in the negotiations have agreed a 20% reduction in their mackerel quotas for 2019. The reductions reflect the available scientific advice and the abundance of this stock, and that the abundance of this stock has declined. This level of reduction is seen by all parties as essential to ensure that the stock is fished sustainably. Irish fishermen will now have a quota worth over 55 million directly to our catching sector for 2019. Arrangement was also reached on a 2-year extension of the sharing arrangement between the main parties, the European Union, Norway and the Faroe Islands. This provides a welcome degree of stability for this hugely important fishery. Mackerel is Ireland's single most valuable fishery, and in my view this agreement provides stability combined with a precautionary approach to help ensure the long-term sustainability of the stock. The scientific advice is currently being reviewed and assessed by the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas, ICES. The coastal states will meet again to consider the outcome of that review when it becomes available. This is expected to happen in early 2019. While the quota for Ireland is less than that of recent years, these quotas were unusually high in those recent years by historical standards. The quota of 55,000 tonnes for 2019 is in line with our historical average quota. Ireland will continue to be cautious with this critically important stock.
Well, so just in relation to the scientific advice, the fishing industry is very critical of the scientific advice and whether it is actually accurate or not. I'm just wondering what your department's view is in relation to it, if you could expand a wee bit more in relation to that, because I think that's critically important in terms of deciding the annual quota that's allowable, the total allowable catch for any species, is the scientific advice. And there is some concern within the industry as to whether the scientific advice is actually accurate and whether it reflects what has actually been seen by them on the ground. So I'm just wondering what role maybe the department takes in the deciding advice, and also what your official view is in relation to the scientific criteria that is used. Thanks.
1 minute.
As you are aware, the ICES advice was for a 61% cut in the total allowable catch, which was 318,000 tonnes, or it would have been at 318,000 tonnes, of which our share would have been substantially less than the 55,000 tonnes that we've got. In the context of what has been agreed is a 20% cut, but a review of the science in early 2019. And there are issues that have been raised with the data inputs that contribute to the formulation of the advice. A benchmark review of those data has begun, and that's expected to conclude in February, I understand. So, I mean, we are open to a review of that science. I've heard and have personally engaged with the industry on that matter. They are adamant, that the science may be incorrect, and quote previous instances where this, in fact, has proven to be the case. So I think it was incumbent upon us to have an open mind in that context and to take, I suppose, a precautionary approach in the context of establishing the quota, which sees a cut, but to revisit that in the context of the reviewed science. All of us have a shared interest in making sure that the fish stock is fished sustainably, and that's why we will be revisiting this in February.
Final supplementary, Deputy Pringle.
Thanks, Mackeral Quota2. Minister, I still haven't got to what actually the department's view is in relation to the scientific advice, and do you have a view? Because it seems that you haven't, and that you're just going to wait and see. And I think that's a process that maybe we should be taking a stronger role and seeing, if our fishing organisations and obviously possibly the Marine Institute are taking the view that the scientific advice is wrong. Surely our department must have a view on it as well, and I think that's vitally important in terms of actually whether this review will be taken on board or not, or will it just be another SOP that fishermen have to put up with.
The department to deliberately undermine science. We generally are advised on these matters by the Marine Institute in particular. And there is within ICES and implicit within the decision a willingness to reconsider the science and look at how the conclusions of that science were reached, and for that reason, and look at the data inputs that arrived at a proposal that was suggesting a 61% cut in the total allowable catch for 2019. Obviously, in terms of all of these issues, and this is provided for under the Common Fisheries Policy, we are obliged to take on board the science, but also the socio-economic impact of the science. And this is specifically provided for, though sometimes conveniently ignored by some commentators, to find a balanced outcome. And we felt it was a prudent, in terms of an outcome, to review the science once ICES had conducted its own review. I think that's a reasonable position to take, given the fact that we are not the scientists in the department. We are advised by the scientists in the Marine Institute, whose findings feed into ICES. So that will be reviewed in February 2019.
Question number 10, and the name of Deputy Borg. Permission has been given to Deputy Hayden to take that question. Deputy Hayden, 30 seconds.
Just want to ask the Minister about